Well, hello again. How many of you were not here yesterday? Oh, quite a number. Okay, good. That gives us an opportunity for everyone to show off again. And let all of you people who weren't here yesterday know how much everyone learned yesterday. Comprehensive review. We call it a review, not a quiz. So we started out with a long discussion about this new phenomena in our mental ecosystem of multitasking, and how that multitasking is really very seriously beginning to erode our capacity to place our attention on an object and to keep it there. So to voluntarily, rather than respond to a demand from a ping or something in our environment. So we choose an object to place our attention on and keep it there. So this is something that I'm beginning to consider every bit as dangerous for our species as global warming. So it's beginning to show up, interestingly at the same time, but it seems every bit as inexorable, and it seems every bit as dire. So all kinds of other things showing up with our inability to focus, and that absence of what has always been regarded as an essential sustenance of health and happiness. The ability to place your attention on an object and keep it there. So when we began to investigate, so it's always the approach of 2,500 years of meditators has been that when you engage the world with single-pointed attention, everything that you do will be better. When you're in the present moment and you're able to engage the world from that present moment, everything that you do will go more smoothly, you'll be more efficient, you'll be happier. And when your attention is scattered and you are either living in the past or the future, or you're falling asleep, you're going to be less healthy, less happy, and everything that you do is going to be more difficult. So we began to investigate what really is our default state of attention these days, and the type of attention that our culture is really beginning to train in us, which is an attention we can really, from the perspective of Shamata, people who have really been able to develop this capacity for stable, vivid attention. Our culture is training us in an attention deficit disorder. And so this then we began to discover or explore what this default state is of our attentional deficit disorder. So with the first 3-minute meditation that we did yesterday without any instruction, we began to explore in the terms of Jason Kappa whether we have a mind or our mind has us. And so many people probably for the first time really were able to experience firsthand how it seems like there's a narrative veil between me and my experience of the world. There seems to be a narrator that is describing my experience to me rather than me experiencing it in the present moment. And this narrator has there is one of these in the DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorders, but I'm not using that definition here, but that narrator is a obsessive-compulsive delusional narrator, and it leads to obsessive-compulsive delusional disorder. So we can say that it's obsessive because it always is demanding our attention. We can say it's compulsive because it gets our attention, and we really begin to give it all of our attention. And then it's delusional in the sense that we begin to believe that the story that this narrator is telling is the whole truth, that is reality, and in fact that narrator perhaps is me. And without that narrator's story, could I know anything of the world? And without that narrator, would there even be a me? So that obsessive compulsive delusional narrator, it causes the disorder of all of our problems, basically. Taking that as reality. So in order to, Shamata practice then is all about pulling the plug on that obsessive compulsive delusional narrator before it gets started. And we do that by taking advantage, developing a strategy that takes advantage of this basic tenet of the mind, that the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And so if we give the mind something else to focus on, we can keep that obsessive compulsive delusional narrator in its place, which means out of our minds, out of our attention. And so we do that by deliberately choosing an object to place our attention on. So this is what mindfulness means in the context of shamatha. It is your active moment-to-moment attention placed on an object of your choice and then sustained there. The metaphor in the classic scriptures is our untrained mind is a wild elephant. Mindfulness is the rope that keeps this elephant staked to an object of our choice in the ground. So what we are doing then is choosing an object, and then the consensus of 2,500 years of meditators is that the best object, if you're one of these very rare people whose mind is prone to discursive thought, that you actually, instead of maintaining single-pointed concentration, you're one of these rare people who is prone to excitation, meaning you can't keep your mind on your chosen object because it's always flying off to some memory of the past or some fantasy of the future. One of those rare 99%ers. The best object by consensus of the Buddha, Asanga, Arya Asanga, and Pabanka Rinpoche, and everyone between, is that the breath is the best object. And the breath is the best object because it is constant enough to really, so that you know whether at time 2, when watchfulness checks in, whether you're on the same object or not. So that requires a constant object, very helpful to train your attention. So at time 2, yes, you are on the object, no, you are not, because it's a different object. Watchfulness can tell you definitively. So constancy is a very helpful aspect of that at this stage. And then the other thing about the breath is that it is also changing enough to really engage your attention. And so this really the constancy helps with developing stability. The changing aspect, the ever-changing aspect, and the living nature of the breath really helps with maintaining clarity and developing clarity. So it's a perfect object. And this is why the Buddha, Asanga, and Pabanka Rinpoche said, if you're one of those 99% prone to excitation or discursive distraction, then the breath is the best object for you to choose, especially while you're trying to develop stability. And I should just mention that in this whole discussion, we're talking about a progression. Shamatha is a progression through 9 stages that were outlined and described by Master Kamalashila, the great 8th century meditation master at Nalanda University in northern India. And so he describes this progression through the 9 stages, where stage 1 is you're just able to place your attention on your chosen object and keep it there for a few seconds. And then stage 9 culminates with perfect and effortless single-pointed concentration for about 4 hours. And then getting from A to Z is the whole point of what we're doing this weekend, and discovering what A is in the first place. So to do that, then, we can we know now what our object should be, so we can place our attention on our object. So how do you sustain your attention on your object, on your chosen object? So that's the big question. How do you do that? We have all tried, and probably anybody who's been meditating for 30 years has been doing this. You have been trying the furrowed brow approach. You have been trying to will concentration, because this is the way that it is frequently taught. The way that you concentrate is with this mental isometric. It's as if you're pushing against the wall, and that you are going to maintain concentration by will of force, or force of will. And so you furrow your brow, and squint your eyes, and your ears start smoking, and then you give up because that's no fun, and you decide that you're not a meditator, and you're going to go out sailing today instead, or take up golf. Maybe golf is better for concentration than meditation, because this just isn't working. So the furrowed brow approach just doesn't work. What all of Shamata is based on balancing acts. So it's a balance. The very essential first balance is balancing effort and relaxation. And so because we live in this hedonic culture, which is much different than the culture of the Buddha or Patanjali, who developed most of these practices, we probably need to do a little remedial relaxation. So the basic fundamental tenet is that relaxation is the key to all of higher concentration, your ability to sustain your focus where you place it, where you choose to place it. And so we do that. The big problem with our approach to relaxation is that every time we relax, we have trained ourselves to fall asleep, because we do that every night when we go to bed. And so we have to, first of all, because relaxation is such a fundamental to our ability to concentrate or to maintain our focus, we have to untrain that habit. So we have to break that habitual association of deep relaxation and dullness. And we do that then, so that is first of all, what we do is we are establishing the base of relaxation. And the way that we do that is by focusing on tactile sensations in the body. That is the best approach for developing that base of relaxation. So we give our full, bare attention to tactile sensations in the body. And bare attention connotes that you are able to distinguish what is truly a tactile sensation from a conceptual overlay. Sorry, you guys, I haven't asked you many questions yet, but you're doing great. So far, you're all getting 100. You're focusing on tactile sensations only. So this is as if our minds are the world of our phenomenological experience, meaning the way that we actually experience the world, you could say is dominated by 6 phenomenological domains, which are the 6, Tibetans say 6 senses, or Abhidharma says that we have 6 senses. So it's the 5 physical senses, and then the mental also, the domain of mental experience is also considered the 6th sense. And so it's as if there's a monkey in a room with a window in each wall, and one in the floor and one in the ceiling. And that this monkey is continually bouncing around the room looking through one of these windows. The view is completely different through each of these windows. And he can only look through one window at a time. So that is the world of our phenomenological experience. And so we need to distinguish with bare attention while I am attending to these tactile sensations, because I'm establishing the base of relaxation in the body. So we attend to tactile sensations only in the body, the sense of touch. Is it truly a tactile sensation, Or am I dealing with a conceptual map of the body? Which window am I looking through? Because this, right at the beginning, we begin to experience how much of our engagement with the world is conceptual. Rather than through one of the 5 sense domains, it's very conceptual, largely. And so we engage our own bodies that way. A lot of people's subtle body practice is completely, entirely conceptual, with a mental map of 3 channels, etc., etc., etc. And I am moving prana like, it's like one of the subway bus maps, lights go up, down the map, bing, bing, next stop, trebating, ding, ding, all out, but it's a lot of people's, so we don't want to do that. What we want to do is to train a more and more subtle attention to be aware of more and more subtle tactile sensations in the domain of the body. So it's as the Buddha told Bahia when Bahia walked up from the tip of southern India to find the awakened one. And after many months of journey, he found the Buddha and asked him, "How do I become like you?" And the Buddha said, "O Bahia, in the seen there is only the seen. In the heard there is only the heard. In the felt there is only the felt. In the mental appearance there is only the mental appearance." So that's what he was saying. Develop bare attention. Be able to distinguish a true sensory sensation from a mental or conceptual overlay. And then Bahia, that's all because it was said in the sutta that Bahia had very little dust in his eyes, and so he was able to become enlightened immediately just hearing that instruction to develop bare attention. Good thing, because he was run over by a chariot the next day. But so nick of time. So anyway, we want to, as a base for developing the base of relaxation, we give bare attention to tactile sensations in the body. And then we begin to, there's one more thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot yesterday about this bare attention. One of the most powerful, so at first what we're doing is we're giving our bare attention to tactile sensations wherever they arise in the body. And so I always include this, whether it be an itch on the surface of the skin or some fluttering or trembling in a deep tissue or muscle. So these itches, so when you just kind of really settle down and pay attention, itches are really profound tactile sensations. What is an itch anyway? It's very curious. I meditated on this for some time now, and trying to figure out what the adaptive purpose of an itch is. Pain is easy to understand. It's don't put your weight on that joint. Take your hand away from the fire. The pain is easy to understand. It's giving you a message that you have to change something to protect yourself. But an itch, come on. There was nothing there ever, until now I have an itch under my eyelid. What is that all about? And what's the purpose of that? And you see meditators all the time. They're sitting there perfectly still, look deep in absorption, and then all of a sudden, what is that? So I have come to the conclusion that the only purpose of an itch is to act as an arena for compulsion to act in. So it's all a setup of compulsion, the itch is. And so it's very interesting to just watch this then, because you can really begin to distinguish tactile sensation from the conceptual overlay, which is the compulsion. In this, when you're dealing with an itch. So it would be very interesting to take a poll now. How many people have ever watched an itch go? Oh, well, meditators, okay. Because most of us, the moment that an itch arises, what we do is we give into the compulsion to scratch it. So we watch it arise. We hardly give it a chance to abide, before we end it, because that's the whole point. It's compulsion has had its day. So what's very interesting is just to sit and watch an itch. You note that it is arisen, and then, wow, I can watch it without giving into the compulsion. I can also watch the compulsion say this, and the compulsion would say something like, this is intolerable. If I don't do something about this right now, I am going to be living with this for the rest of my life. Do I really want to have an itch under my eyelid until I die? No, don't. Do something about it now. That's the compulsion, right? And so you just sit there and listen to that voice, watch the itch, and you notice that the itch has a life cycle of what? 5 seconds? Something like that. Maximum 15. And then, so it's so interesting to do that, to just watch the tactile sensation, watch it abide for some time, and then watch it say goodbye. It's so interesting. And then that becomes a very powerful lesson for all of experience. Compulsion, when you're there and you have given in. Yesterday we talked about the Cole Haan advertisement in the subway, and how Cole Haan says that only boarding are bored, and so the antidote was either the lime green pumps or the orange loafers. And so you give into that, so you go, oh yeah, so I get what you're saying, Cole Haan. I'm bored, so I'm down here at the shop right now, and you're just ready to whip out your credit card. And what happens if you, instead of hand it to the merchant right there, you just sit there for 15 more seconds and watch the compulsion to have those shoes abide and dissolve. You might decide to inhale clarity instead, as your antidote to boredom. So it's interesting just to watch all of these compulsions in their life. I've heard psychologists talk about that also with cigarette addictions and other addictions. If you can watch or hang on for 15 seconds and just and not give in to lighting up for 15 seconds, you're good, because it's gone. The compulsion is gone. So we have chosen the breath then as the anchor, so we are then settling the breath in its natural state. And we give up all egoic control of the breath. So this is not pranayama that we're doing while we are doing our focusing on the breath. We are just settling the breath in its natural state, meaning that we just let the body breathe itself. We just breathe out naturally, and then the weight of the atmosphere just seems to spontaneously fill our lungs again. And that again is something that not everybody can do without practice, because the breath is something that is very easily controlled, and the ego will control whatever it can. And so this is again noticing, very powerful noticing of our tendency to need to control everything, including the breath. Luckily the body can breathe very well without our conscious attention. And so we don't need to determine. We don't need to equalize the length of the out breath and the in breath. We just let the breath fall in its natural rhythm. And then along with this mindfulness, which is placing our attention on a chosen object and keeping it there, sustaining it there, we need to develop this quality of mindfulness as well. Watchfulness. So we have mindfulness, which is our attention placed on an object and keeping it there. And then watchfulness is this corner of the mind, we said, to start with, that you dedicate to checking in periodically to let you know how you're doing. And so what watchfulness is doing It is determining, checking in to monitor the quality of your attention. And the qualities that it's looking for are stability and clarity. But it doesn't notice stability and clarity. What it notes is the absence of stability and clarity. So, and that absence of stability is called excitation, sometimes called distraction or scattering. But we'll call it excitation. So it means that you have lost your object, your chosen object of mindfulness, and it feels like that. Your attention has scattered. And so we use this metaphor of driving down a two-lane road. And so you're driving down the road and you're making micro adjustments to stay in a straight line, you know. So you're a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, and off to the left is the left, in the left ditch is excitation, so that if you end up in the left ditch of excitation, you have lost your object, meaning you have left the road. If you end up in the right ditch of dullness, it means that you have lost your object, you have left the road. So these are, if you can avoid excitation and dullness, you will stay on the road, you will stay on your chosen object of focus, which is the tactile sensations of the breath, what we've been working with. So this is, watchfulness at this point is just going to check in periodically to let you know how you're doing. Do I have an absence of stability, or do I have an absence of stability? Have I lost my stability, basically? Meaning that I'm in the left ditch of excitation. Have I lost my clarity? Meaning, has my attention become dull? Am I becoming drowsy? Am I starting to dream? Have I fallen asleep? And then to stay between the two ditches, to keep her on the road. No, it's to keep her between the ditches. The exhalation is the key to stability. So you follow the out-breath all the way to the final instant of the out-breath. And the key to clarity is the inhalation. So that we discovered that at the very beginning when we balanced relaxation and clarity. The way that you break that habitual association of deep relaxation and dullness is that you notice when you're beginning to slip towards drowsiness, and then you inhale clarity. And that's all we said about it at that point. You inhale clarity and you deepen your relaxation on the exhalation. So the key to stability is the exhalation, and the key to clarity is the inhalation. And then counting can be helpful, but don't drone the count on the entire exhalation. You punctuate the final instant of the exhalation, right at, just because there's a natural pause between the inhalation and the exhalation, and the exhalation and the inhalation, very typically brief pause. And so you take that as your destination for your mindfulness. I am going to make it all the way to the end of that exhalation. My destination is the pause. And because I gave you that provocative hypothesis, the second of the provocative hypotheses that you're checking out, and that is that you will never lose your object on the in-breath. You will never lose your attentional stability on the in-breath. So it's, if you can just maintain your attention all the way through the out-breath, you're good for another half cycle. And then you need to, so counting can be helpful, but use that as a destination again for your attention by punctuating the final instant of the out-breath at the pause. So if it's helpful, do that. Count from 1 to 10. If you lose count, start over again. And if it's not helpful, if it's just a distraction, don't do it. It's totally optional, training wheels. And if you make it to 10, then you might as well just stop counting because you're okay, and just focus on tactile sensations there. So you need to then also develop to develop stability, you need to learn a new reflex. And that is when you discover that you have been shanghaied, when your attention has been shanghaied, meaning that you have fallen into gross or coarse excitation, meaning you have lost your object. And that typically will take you to, where did we say? So where we don't want to go is across the bridge. So you wake up across the bridge, and you have been there for, so you realize that you started out focusing on tactile sensations of the breath, and then you have been totally distracted for 10 minutes. Anybody ever experienced that? So sometimes if you're meditating for an hour, you can be distracted for 55 minutes. But you wake up after some long period, and you realize, oh my God, I have crossed the bridge. How did I get here? And it's as if somebody has snuck up behind you with a chloroform rag, thrown you in the back of the trunk, and then you wake up on the other side of the bridge wondering, how did I get here? So you only recognize, just as in non-lucid dreaming, you only recognize the last image or two that you wake up to. And so what you do then to return, in order to develop stability, when you recognize that you have been shanghaied, what you do is, first of all, we develop the 3 R's as our reflex. We release our grasp on the object. We then return to our chosen object. And then we deepen our relaxation again on the next out breath. And then we then begin to, so far what we've done, we've really, so I didn't mention that the Buddha authorized 4 positions and encouraged and said that we have to master 4 meditation positions. The one that we're very familiar with, the seated position. The one that others that we're not so familiar with, walking meditation and standing meditation in this lineage. Both are very, very important to master. And then here's the 4th one that the Buddha told us that we should master and that we need to, which is Shavasana. We need to master meditation in Shavasana, and that can be heretical for people who have been told that never, never, never try that. So you need to do that. You need to start your meditation practice in Shavasana and master that first, because that is the most relaxed position. And so because relaxation is so important to focus, you need to develop deep relaxation first, and then break that habit of deep relaxation and dullness, and then move on from there. That's the fundamental foundation of your entire practice. So Shavasana is a great place, and you need to do that, especially in retreats. You'll be going back and forth from session to session between Shavasana, seated position, walking meditation, standing meditation, occasionally if you're dull, etc. But you'll use Shavasana typically in the 10-day retreats that I do. In a group this size, we're doing 18 Gatikas, 18 24-minute sessions a day. That's a little over 8 hours of meditation. Typically, because everyone has the choice of which position that they want to do at that particular moment, there'll be 1/3 of the people in Shavasana, 1/3 of the people sitting on the floor, and 1/3 of the people on a chair, and just back and forth. And that's the way that you can meditate for 8 hours a day without getting burned out. So you need to master Shavasana. And then, so we started, you're focusing on tactile sensations of the body. Then we said that the Buddha said for stability, the best object to choose is the breath. So then what does that mean to focus on the breath? It does not mean focus on a mental image of the breath. It does not mean have a visual image of a stream of smoke coming out of your nose. It does not mean having a mental map of your body and following the course of your breath from the tip of your nose into your lungs and out again. Those are all important practices in other practices, but guess what? They do not help you to develop stability. And so the best way of developing stability is to focus on tactile sensations of the breath. So you're focusing on the tactile sensations of the breath. First of all, wherever they occur in the body, you take a deep breaths, but then we give the breath a target at the abdomen, the rise and fall of the abdomen. And then that is very good for relaxation because it's a coarse tactile sensation. And then we move to the more subtle tactile sensations of the breath at the tip of the nose. And there's very great benefit in moving from the coarse to the more subtle, in that the more subtle tactile sensation demands greater acuity of our attention. And so that greater acuity of attention reveals a more fascinating object. And so then you develop that synergetic upward spiral of greater acuity reveals a more fascinating object. The fascinating object keeps your attention on your object. That stability actually helps to produce greater clarity, which actually helps to sustain your attention on your object because it's more fascinating. And on and on and on, up you go through level. So this is how you get from stage one, where you're able to place your attention on your object and sustain it there for a few seconds, to stage two, very significant increase. You're able to sustain your attention on your chosen object for about a minute. Very substantial jump. And then to get to level 3, a huge jump, where you are actually on your object more than you are off your object. 51% of the time you are on your object. In order to do that, watchfulness has to really become very powerful and very, what has to happen here is that we said that watchfulness was checking in before periodically every 6 or 7 breaths. That's the image of the sentry. Now, in order to get to level 3, watchfulness has to alert you more quickly when you have lost your object, so that the time away from your object is less. And so you return more quickly, so you have momentum still. And then you're able to do what's called patching the gaps, because you haven't been away for so long. So in order to really be able to patch the gaps, your watchfulness has to be turned from a sentry into a motion detector. And so to do that, to become a motion detector, you have to train your awareness now. We're beginning to do this now. Watchfulness has to become something more like introspective awareness. And so you train your introspective awareness by what you are paying attention to. You train awareness by what you pay attention to. And so the way that we do that here is by adding a 4th R to our reflex. When we discover that we have been shanghaied, we release our grasp on the object because we realize, no, it isn't really a chloroform rag. I have willingly engaged on that object, some usually attractive object. It's not always that I go across the bridge. I often go to Halibut Point. And so I'm sitting there, the breath is becoming boring. I know that, wouldn't it be great to be out at Halibut Point? Yeah, let's go. And so we go off to some memory of the past of Halibut Point, or some fantasy of the future of going there if this guy ever shuts up. What we do then, we release, first of all, the 4 R's, the new 4 R's, then we release our grasp on the object. And then we really need to recognize the difference between waking up from the distraction. This new lucidity, because we have been totally non-lucid for the 10 minutes that we were cognitively fused with our distraction. Because we wake up to just the last 10 images, or the last couple of images. What happened to that whole 10 minutes? I don't know. We drive across town like that too, right? How did I get here? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. So that's what our meditation, our typical being Shanghai is like. So the second new R is to rejoice. A moment of sukha. I am lucid again. And you really need to notice, take very careful note of what it feels like, that lucidity feels like, and how it's different from that state of cognitive fusion with your distracting object. And that's how you train watchfulness to become a motion detector rather than a sentry. So it's release, rejoice, then return to your chosen object, and then relax ever more deeply on the next object. And that's how you will train then. That's the absolute necessary component for getting to stage 3, where watchfulness begins to alert you more quickly that you have lost your object, and then it becomes more like the rumble strip then on the side of the road. Before you enter the ditch, it wakes you up that you are about to, you're just about to leave the road, either into the ditch of excitation or to the ditch of dullness. So apply the antidote now, which is, the antidote would be focus on the exhalation to deepen your relaxation, focus on the inhalation to induce clarity. And then we said finally that what is the length of your meditation session? So now this is a quiz. Give you a chance to show off. What is the length of your meditation session?
One inhalation, one exhalation.
One breath.
One cycle of in-breath and out-breath. And it's very powerful to begin to think of your meditation session as that. Just one cycle of in-breath and out-breath. Rather than 24 minutes, rather than an hour. Every session, every cycle of in-breath and out-breath is a brand new session, giving you an opportunity to have level 6 stability and vividness. And that feels great. You're no baggage. I'm having a lousy session, because the first 22 minutes were bad. No, you're not. You are having a session and a brand new session. So why not make the most of it? And then you'll notice that sessions really vary. One cycle of in-breath and out-breath is stable. One cycle of in-breath is not. So by recognizing that, you then have an opportunity to employ what we call the Padmasambhava oscillation. This comes from, it's a tip from the founder of Padmasambhava, who was the great tantric yogi who introduced tantra to Tibet, and long story. But anyway, one of the greatest meditators in all of Tibetan history. And so he suggested this, what's called the Padmasambhava oscillation. So on every in-breath, you are really ramping up your clarity. On every out-breath, you are really deepening your relaxation. And so that then, you begin, when you really begin to practice that, you notice that it's possible for me, as my attention becomes more stable, I can really begin to notice a difference in the amount of clarity at the beginning of my in-breath to the end of my out-breath. It just goes like the ocean washing on to Long Beach, The swell washes onto the beach, and then it recedes again back into the ocean. So your clarity comes up, and it is, if it were to, what would happen if it didn't recede again? If the ocean washed onto the beach and it didn't recede, but it just kept coming. Like Sandy, you had one of those tidal surges, or probably happens at king tides and things too, where it doesn't stop where it typically does. You get flooding, and that's exactly what excitation is then. The tide just keeps coming, clarity just keeps coming, and it knocks you off into excitation. So what do you need to do? Quickly apply the antidote. Deepen your relaxation on the next out-breath. So this is then what we call how your meditation practice evolves from driving down the 2-lane road to where you can drive home drunk and keep her between the ditches, out in Mazama, Washington anyway, because there's no other traffic on the road. So I'm not advocating this is only an example. And I haven't done this for 40 years. So you can drive home between the ditches and be falling asleep, more or less, right? You don't require much vividness in your attention. But then when you get to the 1-lane road, when you leave the Goat Creek, the Highway 20, and you're headed up Goat Creek back up to the mining claim, the single-lane road with 20-foot or 50-foot drop-off down to Goat Creek, your attention becomes a lot more vivid. And then, because the ditches are closer, right? And then when you are out with your buddies or a class climbing on Coxcomb Ridge on Mount Baker, and it's a 200-foot drop off either side of the Knife Edge Ridge, any problem with thinking about what's going on next week or what happened last week? Any problem with falling asleep? No, your attention is right there, feeling every step, noting what the snow crystals look like ahead of you, because that could tell you about, whether that's the edge of a cornice or not. Everything, your attention could not be finer, and that's why people do that stuff. It's because of the quality of attention it requires to do. That's what extreme sports are all about. The quality of attention that is required in order to survive those. And so what we're doing is extreme meditation. And so what lies beyond Coxcomb Ridge? The high wire. So a 1/4-inch steel cable suspended over a deep canyon. And how close are the 2 ditches then? They are beckoning you on either side. There's a 1/4-inch separating dullness and excitation. So the Padmasambhava oscillation. Inhale, clarity. Whoa, deepen relaxation. Whoa, dullness, I'm about to fall asleep. Inhale, clarity. Whoa, I'm about to go off into excitation. Release, relax, dullness, but oh, there's dullness. So it becomes, your attention becomes so finely balanced that you notice that just the increase of clarity, so you really have to monitor it. Too much clarity is going to knock you off. Too much relaxation. And every in-breath and out-breath has the potential to do that. Okay. Any questions about that before we do a meditation that encompasses all of that? Yes.
Very often I find, and I hear other people talk about how the breath becomes finer. I think the word is used.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it becomes finer because of excitation and relaxation. So if you're breathing more finely, you're making adjustments more narrowly.
I like that, Judith. That's a great idea. We talked. Somebody mentioned yesterday about should I take a deep inhalation when I feel myself becoming drowsy? Because that brings more clarity. So I think you're right, that the breath becomes, as you're walking the tightrope, your breath becomes very, very fine, just like your balance, because probably a deep breath would supply too much clarity, supply too much relaxation, and then you would totally be teetering back and forth. So that might, you probably have deeper breath on the one-lane road. The Coxcomb Ridge, it's probably, getting pretty fine. And that's why when we're attending to tactile sensations, we continually have to recalibrate also because the volume of our breath becomes so slight that we can sometimes don't feel any tactile sensations at all. And then we recalibrate at the pause between the in-breath and out-breath. And then note the first, so we recalibrate the acuity of our attention between the in-breath and out-breath at the pause. And then notice the first sensations after that. So I think that's very good. I like that. Yeah, go ahead.
You keep using the word attention, and I've been struggling with that word versus concentration. And that word you don't use, and I guess I kind of figured out concentration is probably the furrowed brow.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The difference between attention and concentration.
Yeah, so that's why I don't like that. And attention is a little more technical, I think, also technically correct. Right? That's what the texts talk about, is attention. And then because we can begin to distinguish then between attention and awareness, where concentration is just a lot more nebulous term. But the big reason is that you're right, because for me, concentration connotes that mental isometric. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
My question is about the use of the, I think you called it introspective awareness to achieve finer and finer balance. It has to become a motion detector. So initially, it's very clear that when you're off your object, I mean, you're in the ditch, right? You're not paying attention to your object, but you've been kidnapped or hijacked.
Yeah.
However, I'm wondering what, as it becomes finer aware that you're starting, when you're not off your object, what is the quality you're looking for? The lack of clarity on the object, the other radio station beginning to fade in? I mean, you're not off it, but you're starting to lose the center line of the road. Yeah. What is it that I'm looking for with the introspective awareness now?
You'll just notice it. For the dullness side, when you get to that very fine level, it's obviously not drowsiness, right? Because that's more appropriate for the two-lane road. That's coarse dullness. And you lose your object completely with coarse dullness and coarse excitation. What we're dealing with on the high wire is more like medium degrees of excitation and medium degrees of dullness. So those are a lack of, so for medium dullness, so for both medium dullness and subtle dullness, what we're dealing with there, the problem is a lack of vividness in our mindfulness. So we are on our object, but we don't have vividness. And what that feels like is a slackening of attention. So it's not a release of attention like in a contraction of attention into itself, like the coarse dullness is, but it's a slackening of your mindful attention. And so that's how fine it gets then, where you can just begin to feel the slackening, because you, with the more subtle, when you get to the very fine balance of your focus, you're dealing with more and more subtle dullness and excitation. So slackening of the attention is the medium degree of dullness. And then with medium excitation, it's exactly as you said with the radio station. You would notice that your chosen object which is the tactile sensations of the breath, have gone off into peripheral attention and some involuntary object, so you haven't lost it completely. And that's why we could say that you have achieved level 4. So you haven't lost it completely, but what you notice is obviously a new object has come into the center of your attention, even though you haven't lost your chosen object, the tactile sensations. But halibut point would come in to the center. And then you would apply the antidote of the in-breath and the out-breath, of the fine in-breath and out-breath, and return your full moment-to-moment bare attention to those fine tactile sensations. Yes?
So it's sort of like the objective sensation of the breath in your body, and the inhalation is bringing light to it, and the exhalation is relaxing into it. So it seems almost like there's 3 things at play, because your focus in a way is the sensation of it in your body, and the light coming to it, and the clarity coming to your focus, and then you're relaxing into the same focus.
Yeah, that's right. So there's, what you're focusing on is not clarity or relaxation. What you are focusing on is the tactile sensation in the body. And then, as you mentioned, what is your name?
Vanessa.
Vanessa, is, you mentioned, it's, what you notice is the quality of your attention. So it's your attention, your mindful attention, is on your chosen object, the tactile sensations in your body. And then watchfulness is telling you the quality of your attention. Is it teetering towards excitation? Is it teetering towards dullness? And for that to happen then, if you are going to stay on the high wire, then mindfulness, as I call it, so we talked about this whole evolution of mindfulness. First of all, I started out with the tow truck, right? It pulls you, it recognizes that you're in the ditch, you know, they call the tow truck. And then it's a sentry, then it's the motion detector, and then I think the evolution of it then in tactile sensations is, I think beyond, is that mindfulness or watchfulness must become a close companion to watchfulness. And the only way that could happen would be when we reach, you know, so after you reach level 4, where you are no longer losing your object, meaning that you have no longer any coarse dullness or no longer any coarse excitation. So you're not losing your object completely anymore. And most people would call that, if you weren't well trained, a lot of people might think of that as the perfection of meditation. I'm not losing my object anymore. I mean, what more is there to it? You know? But that's only level 4 of 9. And so there's a lot more to come, and we'll talk about that. But what happens then when you have reached this degree of stability where you're no longer losing your object, it's the first time that this new phenomena of medium excitation arises. And then, as Bob was mentioning, that's where you then begin to notice this peripheral attention out there, because your chosen object, you know, before you were either on your object or off your object, and that was, you know, it was either dead center or nowhere. And now there's this new phenomena. It's either could be either dead center or out here in the periphery, where you haven't lost it altogether. But with medium excitation, your chosen object of tactile sensation is out here in orbit, and in the center of the target is an involuntary, something you didn't choose. That's why it's a distraction. Halibut point, typically it's going to be something you like, because it's a desirous thing. but it could be anxious also these days, a lot more commonly. That's in the center of the target, but you haven't lost it altogether because it's out here. So what is that then? Are we finally able to, have we evolved to a point where we can actually have two things in our attention simultaneously? What we're doing is we're toggling back and forth very quickly. And so we're toggling back and forth so quickly that we're patching the gaps out here in periphery. This one in the center could change, from one distracting object to another distracting object. So we're not necessarily patching the gaps here, but we're patching the gaps out here, so that, and it's patching so quickly that we can't say that we're really losing our object any longer. So then, how does mindfulness become a close companion of watchfulness? That would be, when it's really finely balanced, what would be happening in the center of your target is your chosen object, tactile sensations, right? Out here in periphery is now, we're not going to call it peripheral attention, we're going to call it peripheral awareness. Because this then is where it becomes more apt, I think, to, rather than call it watchfulness, to call it introspective awareness, another term for it. You have introspective awareness out here, and what you're doing is toggling back and forth, and guess what? You're patching the gaps in both places then. You're patching, so you're maintaining your focus on your chosen object, and you're maintaining your awareness of the quality of your attention here. So checking in, are you teetering towards dullness or dullness? Are you teetering towards excitation? And it's just going back and forth. And that is what I think it means to be, for watchfulness so for watchfulness to be the close companion of mindfulness. Yes?
Some of us yesterday were having a hard time with over-conceptualizing the breathing in clarity and getting distracted by it, literally trying to breathe it in deeply. And you said something about just letting the body breathe itself. Can you just do that a little bit? It's helpful.
Yeah, so you'll just get, all of that, so we had, a total of 2 minutes on that, so you'll have an opportunity to get much, much more experienced at that, and you'll just settle into that. So the thing is that it's not a conceptual, you remain focused on tactile sensations. You don't focus on, give me that clarity now. Give me that relaxation. Like a conductor, bring it up there in the bass section. But that's, maybe that is what you're doing. I don't know. You figure it out. Let me know. But it's not a conceptual. So that's the whole point of the bare attention, is that you begin to notice the difference between a conceptual map of the body. And when you feel, I have a pain in my elbow, is it truly a bare sensation, or is it a mental map of my body? And I put a pin there on my mental map and say, my pain in my body, there at the elbow. So you begin to notice the distinction between that. And one of the interesting things is that when you're really focusing on bare attention, what can happen is that if you don't have a mental map of the body, you can begin to have an experience of your body dissolving, more or less. And where is that sensation occurring? Is it occurring in my elbow? You have to have I think it's called proprioception, to be able to locate the position of the body and where that is. If you can dissolve that even, and what it feels like is a sensation in space. Where is it? I don't know. How does it relate to the previous sensation? I don't know. It came before, but in space, I don't know. So that's you distinguish between the conceptual overlay, and then especially when I say something like brighten your attention, or something, brighten your clarity on the inhalation, that has a danger to create a mental construct of a bright sunny day, and fill your mind with brightness. So don't do that. Focus on tactile sensation, although that is an instruction that you may have heard, but that's not don't do that. And I didn't say that, but other meditation teachers sometimes do say that is the antidote to dullness, is to visualize brightness. But try this and see, and I think this will work better. So you distinguish tactile sensations from conceptual overlay. Just focus only on you, and that's why settling the breath in its natural state comes first, where you just really let the body breathe itself without trying to equalize it. Don't turn it into a pranayama. And then all you do, you're focusing on tactile sensations, but then, like Vanessa said, what you notice is the increase in clarity or deepening of relaxation. But you don't focus on clarity, or you don't focus on relaxation. Okay. So how about if we take a short break, and we'll come back then, so just a few minutes to use the restroom if you need to, and then the rest of us will lay out our mats for Shavasana if you want to choose Shavasana to meditate in, or get prepared to your chairs, your seat, and we will do that meditation all the way from beginning to end that we just described, because all of that is just review. God, we covered a lot of ground yesterday.
Thank you for going over it again.
Could you turn off that fan there, please? That's okay. Release all fantasies of the future, all memories of the past, and withdraw your full moment-to-moment attention into the domain of the body. And there focus on tactile sensations only. And note, first of all, that feeling of solidity where your seat contacts the floor. Then let your attention roam throughout the body where it will. And notice tactile sensations wherever they arise. Whether it be an itch on the surface of your skin, or some sensation deep in a tissue. And if you note any tension or any pain, let your breath be drawn to it as if magnetically. And then release that tension or pain on the out-breath, deepening your relaxation as if with an inaudible sigh. Now take 3 deep, full breaths and note tactile sensations wherever they arise associated with the breath. Now give your attention a target by focusing your attention on tactile sensations at the abdomen. And using those sensations of the rise and fall of the abdomen, or the expansion and contraction. Use only those sensations to note the beginning and the end of each in-breath and out-breath. And note whether your experience is through the tactile window or the mental window. Let your breath settle into its natural state and give up all control of it. Let the body breathe itself. Now give your attention a more subtle object to focus on by shifting your attention to the more subtle sensations at the tip of the nose. Let your attention remain a stable gatekeeper there, noting the passage of the air in and out, but remaining itself unmoved. If watchfulness alerts you that your attention has been shanghaied, release your grasp on the distracting object. Rejoice. I am lucid again. Return to your chosen object, the tactile sensations of the breath at the tip of the nose. And then deepen your relaxation on the next out-breath. The key to stability is the exhalation. Give your full attention to the out-breath all the way to the final instant at the pause. You can count your breath if that is helpful by punctuating the final instant of the out-breath at the pause. If the sensations at the tip of the nose become so subtle that you can no longer feel them, recalibrate your attention at the pause between the in-breath and out-breath. And then notice the first sensations with the first movement of air. If you notice that your attention is becoming slack or dull, leading to drowsiness, inhale clarity. As the balance of your attention becomes finer and finer, You may notice the increase of clarity from the beginning of the in-breath to the end of the in-breath, and the deepening of your relaxation from the beginning of your exhalation to the end of your exhalation. Reinvigorate your clarity with each in-breath. Deepen your relaxation with each out-breath. If watchfulness alerts you that your attention has been shanghaied, release, rejoice, return, relax. Expand your awareness again to the room. And if you're in Shavasana, wiggle your fingers and toes and stretch. And then without losing your clarity or stability, gently return to your seat. Any questions or comments about that experience?
Other than how lovely it was.
Yeah, it's probably a sample of why meditation can become the most fun thing that you do in your life. You know, it's an odd thing. So that, I'm trying to figure out exactly what the ingredient is in this progression that makes it so much fun and so enjoyable and so successful. So you figure it out and let me know. But I think it's all starting with that base of relaxation, and then just settling in, and there's something about balancing relaxation and clarity, and then I think maybe the answers lie in where we're going next. Yes.
I know that, see how to ask this. I know we aren't meant to be in pranayama at all, but I find that when I return to my breath, it's helpful for me to engage a little ujjayi breath in the back of the throat, just as a way of relaxing, but almost it feels like there's a combination of stability and clarity when I constrict my throat slightly and just feel the air rushing off the back. Sometimes that kind of brings me into a place where I'm definitely feeling grounded and relaxed, but not drowsy. It's almost like it, but I know it's pranayama, so I immediately check myself, and the intention is to allow my breath to breathe naturally, I know, not to manipulate it. But do you have any comment about that, or thoughts? Should I not do that, or what do you think?
Well, I think that's part of the reason that this type of meditation is so enjoyable, is that there aren't that many rules, or there aren't rules, and so it's very empirical. I propose research hypotheses to you. We're going to run experiments. You check your own experience and find out what works for you. And then, it's really, I'm just kind of creating a framework for you to run your experiments in, so that everybody has a common language, and then you all get together and say, you ought to check out this little, bandha there, and see what that does, if you're feeling dull, and then somebody else, it's because, you'll come up with your own little golden keys also. And so the whole point is watchfulness. Is this contributing to my stability? Is this contributing to my vividness or clarity or vividness? If it works, God bless. Buddha bless. And just notice what's going on, and so I recommend trying the instruction first, and then don't sanctify it. And then just investigate your own experience. So that instruction is all based in the Theravada, and it's all, so this is something that, a whole approach that Mahayanas kind of, well, not truly. So Gelugpas anyway, neglect this whole approach to meditation. Yes?
Can I just ask you to speak up a little bit? It's hard with the air conditioning, and I have one ear.
Yeah, is that the fan up there?
Yeah, you can unplug that.
Oh, is it?
That one's on though, you can unplug that.
We don't really want to, that's what's bringing the air conditioning in.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just try speaking louder. Let's see. So, so this is all comes out of the Theravada instructions, and so focusing on tactile sensations of the breath, and so there is a Burmese tradition that remains focused through the whole 9 stages of Shamata on the tactile sensations at the abdomen. And many of the Theravadan traditions will remain focused on the tactile sensations of the breath, and then focus on more and more subtle sensations throughout the body. Sensations of the breath wherever they occur through the body, and more subtle sensations. And both of those obviously work for some people. And both have, especially the great body of Theravadan instruction has worked for many people to go all the way to Shamata. So it's so that is a choice. So when you reach level 4 of stability, meaning that you are no longer losing your object, you reach a fork in the road where you can stay in the mainstream of the Theravadan approach, or you can take the left fork with Padmasambhava and follow his advice, which recommends that you may make more rapid progress through the next levels of, especially levels 5 to 7, by shifting your focus again to a more subtle object still than tactile sensations. So what could that possibly be? What could be more subtle than subtle tactile sensations in the body? So in this practice, Padmasambhava calls it settling the mind in its natural state. So we have settled the body in its natural state, which is imbued with 3 qualities of relaxed ease, stillness, and vigilant attention. We have given up all control of the breath, and so allowed the breath to settle into its natural state. And now we are going to settle the mind in its natural state. And this means that the more subtle object for our mindful attention is going to be the ever-changing parade of appearances within the space of the mind.
Could you say that again, please?
What we are going to, how far back?
Sentence, that's all.
We are going, our new object, the more subtle object for our mindful attention, is going to be the ever-changing parade of appearances within the space of the mind. So mental appearances. And the reason that we would do this, the reason we would choose a more subtle object, and the reason Padmasambhava says that we may make more rapid progress, is because of what lies ahead at levels 5 through 7. So at level 4, we can say that we no longer lose our object entirely, because we now are beginning to appreciate this new phenomena that only arises when you have stability of that, where you have really conquered coarse excitation. So you're no longer losing your object altogether. So now you have this new phenomenon of peripheral attention. And then you can really make use of that by employing peripheral awareness also, and introspective awareness. But it's because of that same thing. You've got something going on in orbit out there that's connected to to the center of your target. So you no longer have coarse excitation, but you still experience at level 4, when you graduate from level 4, because all of these stages are a progression. They start from the end of level 3, where you are 51% of the time on your object. That means you've graduated or achieved level 3. And then all the way up to level 4, where you no longer lose your object for up to an hour at a time. And so when you have achieved level 4 and have set foot into level 5, you are no longer losing your object. You are no longer losing your object to coarse excitation, but you are still afflicted with coarse dullness. So we should talk a little bit about that. We said in the analogy of the radio station that, so coarse excitation was you lose your chosen radio station altogether. So you start out here in Rockport tuned to 91.5 National Public Radio, and you go around the cove, and then all of a sudden you lose National Public Radio, and it's Rush Limbaugh who is you're tuned to, without having changed your dial, right? Because it's an unchosen object, and I'm just going to assume that would be an unchosen object. So coarse dullness then is where you are headed out to one of these. So you tune to 91.5 National Public Radio. You go around one of the bends, and there's nothing at all. So instead of the interference of another radio station that has replaced your chosen object, there's nothing at all. You know, because your attention, instead of scattering, has contracted. So there's no object at all. You know, it's not as if your object has been replaced with another object. That's excitation. With coarse dullness, you just don't have any object because your attention has contracted into itself, and you're on your way on that slippery slope. There should be a better analogy, but you're about to fall into sleep, and you know, and that's what that drowsiness feels like. You're just, you know, when your head snaps to, you know, snaps up, you have lost your object because you're falling asleep. It's not that you have replaced it. There's no object whatsoever. You're just falling asleep. So the antidotes to coarse dullness are, first of all, if you're one of the 40% of people in the United States who say that they don't get enough sleep, that you're sleep deprived, then, you know, try to get enough sleep and do it knowing that you are really enhancing your meditation by doing that. You know, make these lifestyle adjustment based on how this is going to affect your meditation. Because if you are just battling sleep constantly, it's going to be difficult to make much progress. There are other strategies that we will talk about also for dealing with coarse dullness. As in choosing a different time of day to meditate. You know, you might be able to do that. If you're really coarsely dull immediately after getting out of bed, which isn't likely, you're probably more prone to real serious excitation when you get out of bed. But, you know, choose a different time. But the important thing about applying an antidote to coarse dullness is to feed enough stimulation to your attention to defeat or to be a real antidote to coarse dullness for a couple of minutes. So if you are, you know, battling drowsiness and you apply an antidote and you're, you know, for 10 seconds you're okay, but then your head is bobbing again, you haven't fed your attention enough stimulation to be an effective antidote to coarse dullness. So it should last for a couple of minutes, or you need to supply more stimulation. So ideally you're going to be able to do that without changing your object. So you may be able to, if watchfulness alerts you that you're becoming dull, so maybe either that your attention has become, well, so here it would be you're becoming dull and really becoming drowsy. You can open your eyes, for one thing. If your eyes are, if you meditate with your eyes closed, you can open your eyes. That often will help a great deal. You can also then, if watchfulness, you know, just note watchfulness also alerts you to your posture. You know, it could be, usually, almost always, you will notice that if you are becoming dull, it's because your posture has done this. You know, you've really relaxed. Your posture. So engage your Uddiyana Bandha again, which will straighten your spine, and then especially notice the elevation of your chin. Very likely your chin has dropped down towards your chest. And so level your chin, raise your chin, and just notice the increase in clarity. Or you can take a couple of deep breaths also, and still be focused on tactile sensations. So if that isn't working, then you may have to just take a more extreme measure, which would mean that you have to actually change your object. So you could open your eyes and then just let your attention expand into the room. Because the problem is with the contraction of your attention, right? So you might just try opening your eyes and let your attention expand out into the room. You can also try tensing your muscles to the point where they really begin to start trembling, and then relax them. So a real isometric, or if, you can try, so ultimately, if that doesn't work also, what you can do is, this is the one time, for instance, so you should remain still throughout the entire session of your meditation. And that's why a Gataka, 24 minutes, is really good, because that's a manageable time to remain still. But if you are within a Gataka, this is the one time where it would be okay to change your position. So you don't shift your position because of discomfort. But if it's an antidote to coarse dullness, you can actually change your position. And what you would do then would be to stand. So that is because of the muscular tension involved in standing, and it's fairly, can be uncomfortable for long periods to remain still. It usually will defeat the sleepiness that you're feeling. And then it could be very well that after a few minutes of standing, you feel bright and refreshed again, and are able to go back to your seated position. But in a group, your real concern has to be not disturbing others with what you're doing. With whatever antidote you're applying, don't try not to disturb others. So be very still, quiet, because you don't want to become your antidote. You don't want to make a problem for someone else. And then at times also then, so if you're, for instance, in retreat, and dullness is just such a problem, what you might have to do in extreme cases, especially in the first day or two of retreat, it's less likely after that, but you may just have to go take a nap. I think that's pretty rare, but it's not so rare, come to think of it, in retreat, in the first couple of days. People come into retreat dull frequently, from having to, everything that they have to do to get into retreat, clean up their schedule and work late, etc. So people come in sleep deprived. So if you need to, take a couple of, go off and sleep for a Gataka or two, knowing that what you're doing is applying an antidote to coarse dullness. So the important thing is just never give in to coarse dullness during a session, but always keep applying antidotes, and keep applying stronger and stronger antidotes until one works. Because you are training, the whole point is that you are training your mind, and you can either train your mind to more or less accede to dullness and say, well, this is just the way that meditation is for me. But if you keep just fighting it, I hate to say fighting because that connotes tension, but if you keep applying stronger and stronger antidotes by feeding more and more stimulation, and it could be that ultimately that the stimulation, the amount of stimulation that you need to feed it is walking meditation. Because you're not going to be falling asleep with walking meditation. And if walking meditation is not doing it, maybe you need to add more vividness to your walking meditation by changing the circumstance a little bit. I noticed after a retreat in Vancouver, or up near Whistler, that came back, and I was staying with some friends right on English Bay, beautiful spot in Vancouver. And so I was going off to do a run in the morning, and then I noticed right away that was just way too fast for my attention just coming out of retreat. So I had all my running gear on, so I decided I would do a walking meditation instead, and okay, that's more like it. So I got up on the seawall and did the walking meditation. And there's, miles of seawall on English Bay. So I started out, they had these rough-hewn granite blocks, and that feels, a lot to pay attention to on the soles of the feet there. So that felt very nice, kept my attention. And then the seawall progressed so that it was narrower, narrowed from about 14 inches to 10 inches. So we're, this is like going from the 2-lane road to the 1-lane road. And then, this feels good. This really has my attention now. Then it reached a point where there was a 10-foot drop-off down to the beach. And this is, okay, now, I'm feeling my attention. And notice the difference in vividness of your attention every time. And then reached a point in the seawall where it was no longer flat on top, but there was a round ball on top. So there I really was on the high wire. And then it reached a point where the round ball led to not only 10 feet of exposure above the beach, but there were crashing waves then below the seawall. And did I, just like on Coxcomb Ridge, was I worried about what next week was going to bring, or what happened last week, or was I falling asleep? No way. That was extremely vivid meditation. So anyway, you apply the antidote that you need. That is just feeding more and more stimulation. I wasn't dull to begin with, but it was an experiment to just feed myself more and more stimulation, and just notice the outcome. It's vividness of your attention. It's engagement with your object. Your kind of the heightened engagement with your object. Another extreme meditation. Let's see, I think I'll skip this. Just very briefly, this idea of toggling, Buddhist psychology says that there are 64 karmas ripening in a finger snap, which means that there are 64 individual moments of perception, right, in a finger snap. That actually accords very well with recent cognitive science, which talks about a threshold for consciousness for conscious awareness being 20 milliseconds, which would be 50 per second. That's probably very close to finger snap, 64 per finger snap. So the threshold being 20, the standard threshold roughly, being 20 milliseconds. So that's 50, what they call ascertaining moments of cognition per second. Whew. That's why toggling works, because you could theoretically be going back and forth 50 times per second, and that's why it would feel like it was simultaneous. So you can then begin to think of stability as how many of those ascertaining moments of cognition, the 50 per second, are on the same object. If all 50 per second are on the same object, you have stability. If all 50 are on different objects, you have total fragmentation. I don't know what that would be, but that would be difficult. You would be probably disoriented, really disoriented. But there's somewhere between those two, is our normal experience. And so then you start to chain together those seconds, 50 of stability, another 50 of stability, another 50 of stability. Pretty soon you have reached level 2, where, but it could be still you have 35 on and 15 off, and that would certainly be enough to patch the gap then, wouldn't it? Because you'd have momentum. You'd have to, it's when you leave for longer periods that you are no longer able to patch the gaps. So that's why it's so important to keep those periods of distraction short, because then it's like you're surfing across a pothole or something in the road. If you're going slow, or this is what we used to say in the mountains, if you go fast, on a washboard road, you only hit the high spots. I never bought that. Just wreck your suspension, but it's kind of like that. If that were true anyway, it would be like that. Patching the gaps, so you have enough momentum to cruise across your distraction. And then vividness. So let's say that it's your threshold is 20 milliseconds. It is possible, even in the laboratory, to lower that threshold to 10 seconds. If you are, so a researcher prepares you and says, in 3 seconds I am going to flash a 10-second stimulus. And because you're prepared for it, you can notice that 10 seconds stimulus when it would have been subliminal before that. So it's possible to do that. And meditators do that also. You can shrink, or you can have that threshold of 20 milliseconds can become 10 seconds or 10 milliseconds, and it can even become 5 milliseconds in research. So you can have 4 times the pixel rate, more or less, right, of the density. You all of a sudden at 5 milliseconds, you have 200 ascertaining moments of cognition per second. So this is what vividness is. You're creating more pixel density in your attention. And so there are 2 different types, you can say, of vividness. One would be a temporal vividness, in which you have more and more, your threshold goes lower, and you have more and more ascertaining moments of cognition. Let's say up to 200 per second. And then there's a qualitative also, in which you are able to experience more and more subtle sensations that were below a threshold of sensation before. So the temporal one is shorter and shorter time periods, so you're packing density into per second. And then the qualitative would be a sensation that may last for 5 seconds or so. It's not the length of time, but it was always so subtle that it was below a threshold of experience altogether. And this is what when you train in the Shamata approach, and you become more and more aware of subtle sensations, then you can become very aware of subtle sensations of the breath in the body that you were never aware of before. And Master Chuladasa, I think, really has very excellent instruction on taking that approach. And then you can lead, so this, I think, is the way that really leads you to subtle body practice. Because the continuum of coarse to subtle in tactile sensations would be, coarse would be pain, migraine headache, toothache, somewhere then along the way is an itch, then you got the abdomen, the rise and fall of the abdomen, subtle, the more subtle sensations at the nose, the sensation of the changes of tactile sensations occurring with the breath in the palm of your hand, et cetera, et cetera. more and more subtle, until what you're becoming aware, you're able to become aware of prana, movement of prana, as a tactile sensation. So then you can really begin to have a much different type of subtle body meditation than you would if you were doing it only as a conceptual experience, conceptual map of a subtle body. That's a much different approach to a subtle body experience. So you do that by vividness, right? That would be an example of qualitative vividness leading to a tactile experience of prana. And so, yeah, interestingly, when Mary Kay and I were at Harbor Yoga, there's a great guide there, Chris Crowdy. Yeah, check him out. This guy, he's the yin yoga is really, when I talk about remedial relaxation and the whole mindful, being able to apply mindfulness to yin yoga, this guy is really good, I think. But he was describing, and will be, I think, really benefit your meditation practice. And you probably have people like that here in the center also that can do that. But that approach, so I just went to his class. I'm sure if I'd gone to somebody's class here, I'd be saying, take Mary Kay's class here. But he was describing being in a 3-month retreat in Burma. And the whole point of the retreat was what he called noting. And the goal of the noting practice was to be able to discern 20 moments of cognition per second. So that would be amazing acuity. But that's that's an example then of that temporal vividness. Being able to really ramp that up. Okay, so enough of that. Now on to the main event. So all of that has just been preliminary so far. So when you reach this level of stability and, the whole point, I should say, that excursion through dullness and vividness is you reach this fork in the road then when you can choose to either stay on tactile sensations of the breath and become more and more subtle, or you can switch to a more subtle object, follow Padmasambhava down the left-hand path and change the object of your mindful attention to this ever-changing parade of appearances in the space of the mind. Why would you do that? It's because the problem that awaits to get beyond level 4, what you really need to do is to begin to battle medium dullness and then subtle dullness. So what are those two? Anyway, they are described, so it's always said, in a lot of the instruction, to get that most of the instruction doesn't break out medium dullness also, just subtle dullness. But in both cases, the problem that you have of mental, medium and subtle dullness is said to be a lack of vividness. Great. So I'll just add some vividness to my meditation. It's called nar in Tibetan, right? And you see it frequently sometimes translated as intensity. And I've seen that demonstrated like that. Described as a cat at the mouse hole. Like that. That's nar. But what that means to me is tension, right? That looks like the furrowed brow to me. And you are not going to you are certainly not going to be able to develop good stability with that approach. And you certainly are not going to be able to develop vividness with that approach. Why is that? Because, why is that? So vividness, all you need to do to combat subtle dullness and medium dullness is to add a dash of vividness. So when I heard that, I went, to the same stores where I went looking for bagel toning index, all over Brooklyn, all over New York, to Chinatown, Little Italy, stopped in at the smallest delis. Okay, I was here last week and you didn't have any bagel toning index. How about some vividness? You must have, where can I find vividness? Because it's so essential to add it. You taste your meditation, it needs a dash of vividness. There it goes. It's described like that, like a spice that you add to your attention to get past. Your attention lacks vividness. So we describe the taste of your stew as subtle dullness. So that's really misleading, because there is no way of procuring vividness. And if you try the cat at the mouse hole approach, you're just going to wreck your stability, right? You're going to derail your stability by doing that. So guess what? The way to get vividness is, first of all, to relax deeply. And then, based on that relaxation, you have stability. That stability produces clarity. And then you reach a degree of stability where you are no longer losing your object. And that, guess what, reveals vividness as a natural quality of your attention. Vividness is a natural quality of stable attention. And so you have to get to level 4 before vividness begins to reveal itself as a quality. And then you really apply that vividness to your attention is vivid, so you are not afflicted with medium dullness or subtle dullness. And so then first of all, you get rid of, the way that it goes as you go through the steps, first you get rid of coarse excitation, then you get rid of coarse dullness, on the next step. Then the next step up, you get rid of medium excitation, then you get rid of medium dullness. Why is that? Because as your attention becomes more stable, meaning that you are no longer have medium, you no longer have coarse excitation, then you no longer have medium excitation, and so when you no longer have medium excitation, that gives you the stability of attention that produces a quality of vividness that is enough to defeat the medium dullness. And then you get rid of the subtle excitation, which produces naturally a natural type of attention, a natural quality of attention that reveals vividness that is enough to defeat the next level, or the subtle dullness also. So it's the stability, the increasing stability, the more and more subtle stability that produces the vividness of your attention, that then produces an attention that can defeat, or I should say is free of medium and subtle dullness. So all of that is why we would follow Padmasambhava down the route to choosing a more subtle object for our mindful attention. Because if you remain focused on tactile sensations, the experience of some meditators anyway, is that can lead to dullness. And so for the same reason that we moved from coarse tactile sensations of the abdomen to more subtle tactile sensations at the tip of the nose, because it produced more clarity, right? And if you stayed at tactile sensations of the abdomen for your entire career, most of us would then, that would lead to dullness, would lead to coarse dullness. So we choose a more subtle object, and that's the reason that we choose the more subtle object now also. And that more subtle object is the appearances within the space of the mind. And interestingly, this approach is said also to be very good for stability. So Dujam Lingpa, the great Dzogchen master of the early part of the century, of the 20th century, recommended this approach also to people who are prone to excitation. That this is, you will find that shifting even to this more subtle object is very good for developing stability. However, if you set out on this practice before being somewhat prepared in stability, what's going to happen if you just take the appearances of the mind as they arise? It's going to be our everyday experience of being shanghaied by every one of these appearances. So this is why it's very helpful to develop some degree of stability using tactile sensations of the breath as your object, because that stability, the stability of your attention leads to a stillness of awareness. Stability of attention leads to stillness of awareness. And so this is what we begin to employ then, when a still point of awareness is what we employ when we embark on this new, more subtle object of appearances within the space of the mind. And so what we are going to be doing then, if we embark on this practice without some degree of stability, our normal experience is that an appearance arises in the mind and then we grasp onto it. And then we go off with it. This is like, so I'll just use again, I should, say Long Beach out here. But I'm going to use the example of Venice Beach in California because it's a little, probably more dramatic. So when I go to, when I was at Mahasuka Center, I stayed with Lauren, in her beautiful place right on Venice Beach. The doors just open up onto 50 yards of sand in the Pacific Ocean right there. And so go out and, meditate on Venice Beach, right on the edge of the water, and with my eyes open. And there, you can't help but notice all this stuff. There are the dolphins out there, surfing the waves. And there are pelicans diving into the water. There are shorebirds, flocks of shorebirds that fly in and scurry around it with the water, the tide, washing onto the beach and sucking back out, and they scurrying back and forth with the water. And then a dog rushes in, to chase the shorebirds. And then there's a guy who walks by, and he's tattooed. And wow, look at those tattoos. He's got a full sleeve on the left, multicolored sleeve. I learned that term, for a full arm of tattoos. And then there's, I noticed that, oh yeah, wow, his back, that's amazing. Look at that dragon on his back, or maybe that's a tree or something. Wow, that's amazing. But then, oh my God, look at that. He's got this big tattoo on his face. It starts at the top of his shaved head and goes down over his nose and covers both his cheeks. Wait a minute, dude, that's too much. That's going way overboard. Who would do that to themselves? I wonder. I'll bet that guy doesn't have any friends. Oh, wait a minute. I'll bet he's got one friend, and that's the guy who owns the tattoo. It's on and on like that, right? I had been there present for the dolphins, for the shorebirds, I had been there present for, and then all of a sudden the tattooed guy comes along, and what happened? I grasped onto it, and I went off down the beach with the guy, telling a story about his tattoos. And so because of that, I went off with the tattooed guy. I wasn't present. I had lost my still point of awareness for when the girl in the red bikini became. So don't do that. You want to maintain your still point of awareness. Because this is what it is. It's a parade of appearances in the space of the mind. And what watchfulness is alerting you for here now. So watchfulness when had become a motion detector, had become the close companion of mindfulness. And it was telling us whether we were still on our chosen object, which was the same object, a constant object, tactile sensations of the breath, right? Now, our object is continually changing parade of contents, appearances, dolphins, shorebirds, dogs, tattoo guy, bikini girl. What is watchfulness alerting us for? Certainly not a change of object, because our object is the continually changing parade of appearances. So what is watchfulness alerting us for? Have we lost our still point of awareness? Have I grasped onto the tattooed guy or not? And so what we notice what we are doing is we are training our attention to be lucid rather than to become cognitively fused with the tattooed guy and just go off in a story, and then just start spieling this whole association of story about the tattooed guy, or about my experience of tattoos in the past and why I've never gotten a tattoo. I wonder if it's too late. On and on. I mean, that could turn into 10 minutes easily, right? And then it's like waking up on the other side of the bridge. How did I get here? So that's what watchfulness is alerting us to. Have I lost my still point of awareness, or have I grasped onto an object and gone off with it? So in the Shamata practice of where tactile sensations of the breath were our object, whenever we noticed that we had been a mental appearance arise, because we were looking only through the window of tactile sensations. So when a mental appearance arose, we released it right away, right? We release it, we rejoice, we return, and then we deepen our relaxation. Here, when a mental appearance arises, we don't chase it away, we don't release it, because that is our object. But what we do is we don't grasp onto it. So what we notice, because what we are doing is we are training ourselves to be lucidly awake, rather than cognitively fused. And what does that mean? To be lucidly awake to the presence of a mental appearance means that we are witnessing the entire life cycle of a mental appearance. We watch it arise, we watch it abide for some time, whatever its natural life cycle might be. It's not that long. And then we watch it dissolve again. So we just are continually watching the dolphin arise, abide, and dissolve. Something else gets my attention after that appearance dissolves. Then the shorebirds arise, abide, and dissolve. The tattooed guy arises, abides, and he will dissolve if I don't grasp onto it. The bikini girl arises, abides, and that's a tougher one because I want to grasp onto that bikini girl, right? That's the tough one. Things that give us pleasure. So it's easy to let go of, well, unless, so it's not so easy, but we want to be able to release the things that we don't like, right? We want to be able to release those. But the things that we do like, we want to grasp onto those, right? So the loved object, or the love object, I want to grasp onto that because I want that experience to remain. But that's later. So in this case, what we do is we watch from our still point of awareness, we watch the entire life cycle of a mental appearance, arise, abide, and dissolve. And instead of chasing it away and releasing it like we would with tactile sensations where our object, we just let it be. Our still point of awareness remains an impassive witness to whatever arises, without preferring that it stay, and without preferring that it go. Wishing, like feeling aversion for it and wishing that it wouldn't be there, or grasping onto it like some very attractive appearance and wishing that it would stay there. Yes.
Can sort of like the ignorant liking or disliking, the aversion, the grasping, can that then just become the object?
Later. Yeah. In the next meditation. Yeah. So for right now, what we do is we just watch these appearances arise, we let them abide, and then we let them dissolve without preference for their staying or going. We just let them be. Awareness remains an impassive witness. So that's what watchfulness is. Your close companion of watchfulness is going to alert you. Has your watchfulness lost its still point? So there's a Tibetan aphorism that sums this up. Let your mind be a gracious host in the midst of unruly guests. So it's welcoming. So your mind is a gracious host, welcoming even unruly guests. You're not going to expel them. You're not going to say, "You've had too much chang. You're 86th. Beat it." Or, "You've had too much chang. You're not getting in the door." You're a gracious host inviting all unruly guests. Because they're going to pass out. They're going to leave on their own, right? They're just, so you don't have to worry about them. These mental appearances cannot harm you. You just let them be. And then the stability of your attention will emerge from your mind at ease, naturally, rather than a mind that is strenuously constricted or a furrowed brow. Your mind is at ease, and your stability will naturally emerge from that. And then the balancing act here is that your mind at ease, don't let it become so relaxed that it becomes slack, that your attention becomes slack. So this is where you're beginning to notice not just drowsiness, not just a dullness of your attention, but a slackness of your attention. So you want to remain vividly engaged with your object. So the essential quality here for entering this practice is being able to distinguish fusion or motion from stillness. So this is said to be the fusion of motion and stillness. You are distinguishing whether your attention is still, or I should say your awareness is still, or is it in motion? And you are also noticing whether the object of your attention, these ever-changing appearances, are still or in motion. And this is called the fusion of stillness and motion. So there's a great image, I think, that sums up or illustrates the type of attention that we need to have to really pull this off. So we said the natural evolution of your, this practice, brings the ditches closer together. So you start out on a 2-lane road, then you move to a 1-lane road, then to a knife edge ridge, then to the high wire. So what comes after the high wire? The high wire is still attached to Earth, right?
Exactly.
So what would come after that?
Flight.
Flight, mid-air. You are in mid-air. Then, how about that? That sounds like, would that keep your attention vivid?
Yeah.
So here's the image that I really like. Are there any bird watchers here? Yeah. Do you have kestrels here?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. A kestrel is really an interesting bird, unique in a number of ways. So when in the mountains of Washington where I lived, there was, when I would go on a bike ride up Twist River, there would be an alfalfa field where there was a kestrel hunting frequently. And so a kestrel can remain motionless in air. Very unique. It's called kiting into the wind. And so a hummingbird can be like a helicopter, right? But its wings are beating furiously, so fast that they're a blur. A kestrel doesn't do that. He is just kiting into a 20-mile-an-hour fresh breeze, and he is just constantly monitoring and adjusting his pin feathers and tail feathers, and able to then remain kiting into the wind, into a 20-mile-an-hour breeze by constantly adjusting. And so if the kestrel were motionless, it would either fall to the ground or else be blown back into the next county on that 20-mile-an-hour breeze, like the leaf is that's blowing along the ground in the same wind, right? Why doesn't the kestrel lose its still point like the leaf and get blown along like it? Because of that constant modulation of its pin feathers and tail feathers. So that's what our attention needs to be like. We are just vividly aware of what's going on. Am I becoming dull? Meaning, is my attention becoming slack? Or am I going off in excitation? Meaning, am I grasping on to one of these mental appearances? So it becomes just such a vivid experience necessary to stay suspended in motionless in midair. So here in this metaphor, the kestrel is our attention. And so we want to maintain that still point, kiting into the wind. The 20-mile-an-hour breeze is the ever-changing parade of appearances within the space of the mind. And so who knows what's coming next in that parade of appearances? It could be a gust, okay, relax. Move those to, bring up the tail feathers. Or it could be, that the direction of the wind quarters all of a sudden. But respond, constantly responding, moment to moment. You have to be in present moment in order to pull this off. And that present moment is what keeps your attention so vivid that it can be free of medium dullness. And that's why we do it. Because it's all about producing, at this point, vividness of attention. And then in this metaphor also, the open air then, that we are motionless in, is the space of the mind. And we'll talk more about that later. But you could have a hawk also, just continuing this, turning this into a Homeric simile. You could have a hawk that would be motionless also in a 20-mile-an-hour breeze, right? Sitting on a top of a telephone, a red-tailed hawk on the top of a telephone pole, right next to this kestrel who is surfing the wind. So what's the difference between the red-tailed hawk? Why would we want to be a kestrel rather than a red-tailed hawk?
Point of reference. He's attached to the ground.
Yeah, and because he's attached to the ground, his talons are sunk into the wooden top of that telephone pole. He could be asleep, right? He could be fully asleep and motionless in that 20-mile-an-hour breeze. So we can't do that because, so that's why we prefer flight. We prefer kiting into the wind because that produces the degree of vividness that we need in order to defeat or in order to be free of medium dullness. And that's how we progress through the next stages. And that's why Padmasambhava says, check this out. Choose a more subtle object. See what happens to your vividness. And if you can succeed at this, and you will, it's not difficult. Watch what happens to both the stability and the vividness of your attention. Okay. Well, I guess we should take a break there. And then when we come back, we'll do this meditation. And so so if it's okay with you, I went on a little late again, but because there's a lot of ground to cover again, if we just start on time at 3:30 again, so we'll come back so that's 22 minutes. 22.